The body lay there, stiff, dry, forgotten, in a shadowy corner of Westminster Abbey. Over a century had passed since her death, and yet somehow she remained intact, as if something or someone refused to let her rest. For years, her unsealed coffin was a disturbing oddity, visible to any visitor who wandered close enough. They said the workmen saw her every time they labored in the church. Some whispered that her eyes looked half open. Others claimed her face still carried a trace of beauty. And then, it happened. King Henry VII, yes, the very one who broke with Rome, who sent his wives to the scaffold and died rotting from within, walked among the remains of his ancestors until he reached her. According to a German chronicler years later, the most feared monarch in English history bowed over her lifeless form and kissed her. Was it devotion? Madness? A twisted thank you? Because that mummified, long-forgotten woman was his great-grandmother, and her blood, tangled with scandal and raw ambition, laid the foundation for the most controversial royal line England had ever seen, the Tudors. Who was she? What had she done to earn such silence in life, yet stir such morbid fascination in death? This is her story, and no, it's not a fairy tale. Catherine was born in 1401 into one of the most chaotic courts in all of Europe. She was the daughter of King Charles VI of France, nicknamed the Mad. Yes, the same king featured in one of our earlier videos. And Queen Isabeau of Bavaria, a woman accused of coldness, manipulation, and even infidelity. Catherine's childhood was, quite literally, a wreck. Her father suffered severe psychotic episodes. He believed he was made of glass, terrified he might shatter if touched. Sometimes he didn't recognize his own wife or children. Other times, he would vanish into the woods or lock himself away for weeks on end. Within this haze of paranoia and detachment, the French court fractured. The Armagnacs stood on one side, the Burgundians on the other, and in the middle, a dysfunctional royal family spiraling out of control. Young Catherine, just a child, was swept aside, her life eclipsed by political warfare and palace intrigue. Her mother, more focused on clinging to her political influence than protecting her children, offered no warmth, no protection. Some even say Queen Isabeau sold royal jewels while the kingdom crumbled in economic despair. Catherine grew up in a palace haunted by whispers of betrayal, by sudden assassinations, by fear. Her name barely appeared in the records of the time. To most, she was just another forgotten royal, a silent pawn. But her bloodline held value. And in wartime, even a forgotten daughter could become the key to peace. Catherine wasn't groomed to rule. She was trained to be given away. Her body, her signature, her presence, all to be used as a diplomatic tool to salvage what was left of a bleeding kingdom. She was a princess with no childhood, no agency, no future of her own. But fate wasn't done with her yet. She was about to become the spark that altered the fate of two empires forever. At just 18, Catherine was handed over to an enemy king. In 1420, the Treaty of Troyes named King Henry V of England the rightful heir to the French crown, effectively disinheriting Catherine's own brother, the Dauphin Charles. It was a national disgrace and a personal sentence. Catherine was married off to the man who had defeated France at Agincourt, the same man now claiming the throne her father had, in his madness, effectively surrendered. The union was cold, strategic, political. Catherine played her part. She smiled, followed her husband, and gave him what he needed, an heir. Their marriage barely lasted a year. Catherine became pregnant almost immediately and gave birth to a son, Henry of Windsor, the future Henry VI. Just months later, her husband died of dysentery in France, leaving her a widow, with a newborn in her arms and no real power. At 21, she was no longer queen consort. She was a watched widow. Instead of respect, she received suspicion. Instead of protection, restrictions. The English Parliament passed a law written just for her. She couldn't remarry without the king's permission, granted only by the reigning monarch and his council. But the reigning monarch was her infant son. Catherine was officially trapped, bound in a widowhood she couldn't escape, a prisoner of political fear, a woman frozen by institutional loneliness and the repressive grip of a court that never forgot she was French. No one suspected that this silenced widow was about to ignite one of the biggest scandals of her age. After Henry V's death, Catherine found herself isolated. The English court watched her every move. She was no longer the foreign queen. Now she was the mother of the young heir to the throne. A young, fertile woman whose remarriage could introduce a rival bloodline and threaten her own son's claim. So they acted. A law was passed, banning her from marrying without permission, a permission that was impossible to get. On paper, it looked like protection. In reality, it was imprisonment. She was alive, but dead to the world of court. Stripped of allies, family, and power, she was relocated to a modest home away from royal affairs. Her daily circle shrank. She was surrounded by servants, but utterly alone. England didn't want her to be seen or heard. She was a political risk with a womb. And it was in that quiet exile that she met Owen Tudor, a Welshman, noble by blood, but humble in station. He served in her household. Some say he managed her wardrobe. He wasn't supposed to matter, until she looked at him, and he looked back. No one knows exactly when their romance began. There are no letters, no official accounts, only rumors, whispers in the halls, and then children, at least 4. Some say they married in secret. Others claim it was a forbidden affair, illicit, passionate, hidden in the shadows. But what's certain is this: Catherine, the watched widow, locked away in a palace without power, found comfort, desire, and companionship in a man without titles, fortune, or permission. It was an act of defiance. In a world where women were property even after widowhood, Catherine dared to love. And from that hidden scandal was born the seed of England's bloodiest and most legendary dynasty, the Tudors. Catherine and Owen Tudor lived their love in the shadows, far from court, in a quiet kind of exile. They made a life on the fringes of history, not as monarch and consort, but as two people bound by affection, not politics. They had several children together. Among them was a boy who would change the course of English history, Edmund Tudor. But scandal was never far behind. Their relationship, whether secret marriage or forbidden romance, was a ticking time bomb for the royal establishment. The very idea that a dowager queen had taken up with a low-ranking servant was an affront to everything the monarchy stood for. When Catherine fell seriously ill in 1437, the court saw an opportunity. She was sent away, under the guise of a spiritual retreat, to Bermondsey Abbey, far from political life, far from Owen. It was a forced isolation, dressed as piety. And there, at just 36 years old, Catherine died, alone, without honor, without ceremony, no royal funeral, no grand processions. Her body was laid to rest at Westminster Abbey, but not with the dignity her rank deserved. There was no sealed tomb, no protective burial chamber, just a poorly closed wooden coffin. And so, unintentionally, the legend began. After Catherine's death, Owen Tudor was arrested. His crime? Daring to love a queen. He was thrown into Newgate Prison, one of the harshest, most unforgiving places in London. Eventually, he was released. But the stain remained. He would never be truly free again. Years later, Owen was captured once more, this time during a political uprising, and executed. Beheaded. Just another nameless rebel in a long list of enemies of the crown. But his children lived on, especially Edmund. Edmund Tudor, the son of a disgraced queen and a humble Welshman, went on to marry Margaret Beaufort, a powerful and devout young noblewoman with royal blood of her own. Together, they had a son, Henry Tudor. That boy, Catherine's grandson, would become Henry VII, the first king of the Tudor dynasty. Yes, the same Henry VII who would later kiss her corpse. What began as a hidden scandal between a censored widow and an invisible servant became the cornerstone of a new royal lineage, one that would change the fate of England forever. Catherine never saw her grandson take the throne. She never knew her blood would spawn a dynasty of kings and queens, of civil wars and religious upheaval, of glory and ruin. But without her, there would be no Tudors, no Henry VII, no Elizabeth I, no break with Rome, no golden age. Catherine of Valois was the forgotten mother of an empire, and yet, for centuries after her death, her body remained in Westminster Abbey. But it didn't rest. There was no grave marker, no royal crest, no peace. Her coffin, left partially open for reasons still debated, became an eerie curiosity. Over time, the lid shifted. Dust settled, air flowed in. Curious hands lifted the cover, and still, her body endured. Visitors, priests, even construction workers in the abbey began to talk. Her skin had taken on a yellow hue. Her features seemed frozen, almost mask-like. For over 200 years, her corpse remained disturbingly well-preserved, exposed, stared at, touched, prodded. She became a spectacle, a royal relic. People didn't speak of her life, but of her body, and the most haunting story emerged near the end of the 17th century. A German chronicler named Paul Hentzner, while visiting England, described seeing Catherine's exposed corpse in Westminster. He wrote of a strange tale, one where her great-grandson, Henry VII, walked past her coffin during a solemn procession. He stopped, looked down, and then, in a moment no one could explain, he leaned forward and kissed her. A gesture of respect, a ritual, a sign of guilt, or just sheer, unsettling madness? No one knows. But the image of a king kissing the mummified face of a long-dead queen has haunted the historical record ever since. And it didn't stop there. Catherine's tomb was opened again and again. During renovations, royal visits, and moments of grotesque curiosity, her corpse was handled, poked, examined. A queen, the mother of a dynasty, turned into an exhibit. Not until the 18th century did someone finally seal her coffin for good. But by then, it was too late. She had been stripped of everything: her crown, her love, her dignity, and even her eternal rest. Catherine of Valois was never a powerful queen. She didn't lead armies or broker treaties. She didn't rule by decree or reform empires. But her silence, her exile, and her forbidden love moved the invisible levers of history. She was born into madness, sold into alliance, locked away by fear, and punished for choosing desire over duty. History didn't want her to speak, so it erased her. But Catherine did not disappear. Not even death could silence her. Her cursed, exposed, kissed, and desecrated body kept her story alive, floating like a ghost through broken glass, cold stone, and whispered legend. Few corpses have been as profaned or as remembered as hers. Catherine of Valois, though never crowned in glory, left behind a legacy that refused to be buried. Her tale lingered not in grand histories or royal archives, but in half-told rumors, in the fascinated eyes of onlookers who stood before her open coffin, and in the cold breath of scandal that surrounded her life and death. She wasn't a strategist. She didn't command armies or rewrite the laws of her land. And yet, through her quiet defiance, through one forbidden love, she reshaped a kingdom. She was a young woman born into chaos, traded for peace, imprisoned by suspicion, and punished for daring to live beyond the walls they built around her. History didn't like her boldness, so it buried her, but not well enough. Catherine's body, exposed for centuries, became a symbol of forgotten women, of unspoken grief, of power twisted into silence. And perhaps that's why her story still breathes today. Because in the end, power doesn't always reside in those who sign treaties or sit on thrones. Sometimes it flows from those who give life. Catherine was the mother of kings, the grandmother of a dynasty, the first link in a chain of upheavals that would redraw Europe's fate. Civil wars, religious reformation, the rise and fall of royal houses. All of it, somehow, traced back to her. And maybe, just maybe, that's why Henry VII paused in front of her coffin that day. Maybe it wasn't madness. Maybe it wasn't morbid curiosity. Maybe it was recognition. A silent confession from a man who ruled the world to the woman they tried to erase. A woman without a voice, without honors, without even a sealed grave. The woman who gave him everything. Today, her tomb finally lies sealed and undisturbed. But her story, it no longer sleeps. If this tale moved you the way it moved us, we invite you to join us on more journeys through the shadows of history. Subscribe Echoes of Torture for more forgotten truths and echoing whispers from the past. Like the video. Share it with someone who still believes queens lived like princesses in fairy tales. And let us know in the comments. Do you think Henry really kissed her? Was it respect? Madness? Guilt? We'll see you in the next chapter, where the past, once again, speaks to us.